Hey everyone, just got done recording with Laura Rerucha, and I'll say that this was a great discussion. If you're a business leader, a team leader, project manager, leading a team in any way, you're going to want to check this episode out. If you have challenges with just you can't get enough done, you don't have enough time, you're not getting any traction in your business or in your team, there's lack of progress, there's stress around these things. We're going to talk about a system of accountability, a system of building a culture, a system of getting things done today that is the most proven system there is in the business world, quite frankly. Laura is an absolutely fantastic leader of business and leader of this system. She's working with organizations and teaching them. So she's seen how teams and businesses struggle and the impact this system can have on them. And she's really turned their businesses around and helped them do that. So she has a lot of wisdom that she shares with us. She shows us how to break down a 10-year vision into what we need to do this week, how to use a system to build core values and build a culture that we need for our businesses and for our teams. This is a great discussion. It's going to have an impact on you, your team, your team's teams, your team's families, and it's going to be a ripple effect. So check this out. Laura was great. Hello and welcome to the Purpose Matrix. I'm very excited for today's guest, Laura Rerucha. Laura, how are you doing today?
Morning, Phil. I'm great. Thanks for having me.
I've gotten to know Laura over the last, several months. She came into our business and did some EOS training with us, talked to us, and also talked to a large group locally here about EOS and everything it's doing. And we're going to talk about EOS traction. We're going to talk about that from the context of a lot of the business challenges and pains that, small business owners and even leaders go through. But before we do that, I want to introduce Laura and really talk through her story and what brought her to what she does today. So Laura's background is in engineering and sales leadership across multiple different companies. She's held leadership positions in entrepreneurial companies. So she's really grown through the ranks and has a good combination of kind of corporate and entrepreneurial background. She's a certified EOS implementer with EOS Worldwide, and we're going to talk about that more today. And really, she just helps entrepreneurs and leaders solve their problems, help their teams solve their problems. So Laura, I want to get into that a little bit, but before we talk EOS, everything EOS and traction, let's talk about your story, your background, and kind of what led to this. So tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, I have an extremely diverse background. I joke and say that I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I've spent half of my almost 30-year career working in large corporate public companies, starting out as a chemical engineer in automotive manufacturing, moving into plastics engineering for a large corporation, and then eventually I spent quite a while in corporate sales before I landed in my first private business, which I tend to call home. I went from being a number in a system, not quite sure how I added value or contributed to those large corporations, to being one of the first 5 members of a private entrepreneurial company. In that role as an operations leader, I worked directly with the CEO to help grow and evolve his business. I worked with him for 7 years. Bob was the leader. And during that time, we grew from 5 employees to 40. We went from 1 to 10 million in revenue, and we more than doubled our presence overseas, where I had to help our licensees duplicate our operations. During that time, I learned a lot about myself. Number one, I didn't want to be Bob. I didn't want to shoulder all that responsibility of not only the employees, but the families that he had. But I cared deeply about Bob's vision. So I was super passionate about showing up like an owner every single day. Number two, I learned that I cared deeply about the employees. So culture, the healthy component of a business is super important for me. And I'll say that I started in that business in 2008 at the downturn of the economy. And Bob and I literally sat across the table and decided how we would pivot that business. He'd create new product offerings. We shifted our target market, and I executed and operationalized those new products. And I'll also add that we are a completely virtual business, doing go-to-meetings or Zooms before it was cool like it is now.
Yeah.
So Bob used to say that was a petri dish of my MBA program, being immersed in the day-to-day of a private business and experiencing all the frustrations and growth, and understanding how to navigate that myself as I led the leadership team and then eventually helped merge a consulting services business with our business and took over operations for both of those companies. Quite the experience.
Laura, I want first of all, so you can hear kind of the resume, and I might be biased, but I think the combination of corporate background with private company background is very, very powerful. But one thing that you said that I want to dig into, because I think there's a misperception of this from owners of companies, from leaders, from people that are more visionary, is they think everyone is like them. And you said that you didn't want to be Bob. You didn't want to do what Bob was doing, but you cared about the vision of what you were trying to do as a company. And you didn't say this specifically, but you wanted to play a role within that, but it wasn't Bob's role. Tell me more about that. Because I think, like, I look at it and I think, oh, well, everyone wants to do what I'm doing, or they want to play the role that I'm playing. And I think that's a misperception. So talk me a little bit through that and your experience with kind of navigating the roles within an organization.
Yeah, I guess specifically when I said I didn't want to be Bob, I meant I didn't want to shoulder all that responsibility of the employees. I didn't think I had that risk in me, but I cared deeply about his vision. So Bob and I were two very different people. Hindsight, while we didn't formally implement EOS in that business, Bob served as a visionary and I served as the integrator. And we couldn't have been more different. Bob was deeply passionate about his leadership development work. I really wanted to figure out how to execute that. But I think that there's a pitfall, too, to a founder, a visionary, where people want to do everything that they say and be similar to them. And we forget to use our own unique abilities and speak up with some authenticity in ourselves. Rather trying to be more like the leader, trying to please them, I would say.
Yeah. And so from a leader's perspective, I guess, like the struggle I have, and maybe as you come across different companies, because you worked with so many, does the leader think, maybe this is just me, but does the leader think, oh, I'm the visionary, and therefore I think everyone else wants to be that visionary too? Because what I've realized through this process is that I'm the visionary, but man, my team, they just want to operate. They just want to execute. They just want to get things done. I have these ideas. They help me filter these ideas, but they just want to get things done. So is this a common issue or challenge or misunderstanding from the visionary, do you think?
I don't see so much that, but more a misunderstanding by the visionary that they've clearly communicated what their vision and their needs are. And so it takes multiple reps. It takes it being said different ways, but more importantly, it takes the rest of the leadership team weighing in and giving their opinions and objectives to the vision that really makes for great, healthy discussion and debate. And I think visionaries 9 times out of 10 will admit, I don't have all the answers. I need that team around me that feels confident enough to speak up and speak into the topics that we're discussing.
Yeah, I think a lot of times visionaries having vision but also facilitating and bringing out the vision as a company. So I want to go, we'll come back to that, I think, but I want to go back to, so your career, so corporate experience, private company, all kinds of different roles that you played, from, operations to building the culture, you talked through that, but so that came to an end at some point and you shifted to, okay, how can I, what's next for you? How can I, there was probably some soul searching perhaps, but how can I help or how can I impact other companies? Because by this time you've probably built the confidence to say, oh, I can do this. I can do this small business stuff. I can do this private company stuff. What was the soul searching like, or what made you pivot to becoming an EOS implementer?
Yeah, it was exactly that, soul searching. So when that business that I helped run and grow merged with another business, eventually new leadership took over. Culture began to shift. Bob's role shifted, my role shifted. And so I found myself in an organization that I didn't recognize anymore. And so I went on to find my next journey, and I went into 2 other private businesses. And with hindsight, I think I went into those businesses out of fear, out of scarcity mindset that I had to find something. The first one was a really great opportunity, and that's what actually got me into facilitation of large groups, doing strategic planning sessions. And I stepped in front of that room and I loved it. I loved engaging the people in the room. But at that time, I didn't really realize that would be part of my future. Unfortunately, that business owner diagnosed with cancer, and I moved on to another private business. So
it's interesting. We had a new employee that started yesterday, and we had our level 10 meeting. So you're going to hear about what a level 10 meeting is here in a little bit. But I just casted the high level, and I did this in my words, Laura. So you're gonna fix what I say here. But I said, hey, at a high level, what EOS does is first, we're going to talk about the culture component and getting the organization aligned around the culture you're trying to build, which I think is like the most important thing. It is extremely important, but also how do we take a 10-year vision to a 3-year vision to 1-year goals to quarterly goals to what do we have to get done this week? And that's the power, I think, of EOS. Other word, like it's a strategy deployment system that you can build your entire operations and your culture around this system. And, if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I don't own a business, this isn't for me, or I work in a big company, I would just encourage you to continue to listen because in my opinion, strategy deployment and getting 10-year, 3-year, 1-year goals to what we have to do this week is extremely powerful, whether you're leading a team of 5 in a big company or running an organization that's $250 million in sales every year. All this applies to any leadership role that you have in any organization. So that was my high level summary, Laura, but go ahead and fix that. How, at a really high level, what does EOS Traction, what does it do? What are the core, like the major components of it? And then we'll dig into some of the details.
Sure. So EOS at a very high level is a set of simple tools and concepts that when applied, help business leaders get better in 3 areas: vision, traction, and healthy. Vision, understanding where we're all going and how it is that we're going to get there. When we can get alignment on that, the chances of success are much higher. Traction, EOS gives us tools for execution and discipline and accountability so that we're executing on that vision day in and day out. And then healthy, it helps us become a more healthy, cohesive, collaborative organization where we can show up authentically as ourselves and view our opinions and perspectives. So when we have all of those things in a leadership team, we can then model to the rest of the organization what that looks like. And so as we go, so go the rest of the organization. I've started to recognize too that EOS is really just a set of objective tools and information that help facilitate conversations that most leaders are unwilling to dive into. We have a lot of ego and we have a lot of baggage and historical baggage that makes up how we show up with people. And EOS, when used, we can cut through that and use this objective information to show that we're either not getting the results or to remove blinders from someone when they're not aware of maybe poor performance or behavior that's misaligned.
Yeah, I like the kind of accountability and the set of tools. I used to say that, so when we were in a project management role, we had a project management team, we would say, hey, let's build the meeting structure and let's structure this so that there's a system of accountability. But that was only within this little meeting, right? So this was only a fragment of what you're talking about. But what Laura's talking about is how do we build a holistic system of accountability throughout our entire organization that we every single week are working towards our 10-year vision. That's a pretty powerful comment if we can do that. And I would just say that, if this is the first time you're hearing about EOS or Traction, definitely check out the book. But it is the most, in my opinion, the most used operating system for entrepreneurs in the world, in the US, whatever it is. And it's not because it just sounds great. It's because it's practical and it works when you put it in place. So first, I want to talk about the vision component a little bit more and how, so 10-year vision, how should we go about building this out?
Yeah, I work with leadership teams to just get alignment around where it is that we're going. And I teach it as we're casting the net. Where do we want to go? If we could play in the land of possibilities, what's that look like? And so every exercise in EOS is around discussion and debate, making sure people feel heard, making sure that they get to weigh in. And so that conversation is started in that way. Oftentimes the visionary already has a vision of where he wants to go. He's just not been able to, or she's not been able to articulate it or get any traction on it. And so it's a way for them to kind of influence and speak into the group what their needs are and to hear from the leaders around them as far as how we set that. That 10-year target is flexible, anywhere from 5 to 30 years, but it's a long-range goal that we set to hit.
And one thing that I want to point out is that, we talk a lot about vision, purpose on this podcast. You've heard this before, but it's not just the outcome of this process that's important. In my opinion, it's the process. And if just imagine if you sit there by yourself and write, hey, for my 5-person team, for my 500-person company, here's the vision. You you all go figure this out. You all go do that. That's going to have some impact. However, if you bring your leadership team together, or bring your team of 5 together and say, hey, what are we really trying to do with our team, with our company? What does that look like? You get their buy-in, you kind of facilitate different discussions, and then you have different elements that are yours and the team's. And you make the final decision. I think it's the leader's final decision to make, but you have buy-in from the team. They're going to be that much more motivated and driven to fulfill that vision than if you just dictate it to them what it's going to be. So the process, that's like, to me, you can follow the traction and EOS system, but you should know that there is a lot of thought process and psychology and other things behind the system that you might not understand, but it's there and the system really works. So we have a vision. So help me get that from a vision to what do I need to do this week, to talk through kind of the layers of that.
Sure. Again, we say it's a 10-year target. We back that down. I think that it becomes so overwhelming to leaders to have such a big, long-range target that they don't know how to break it down into bite-sized pieces. And that's exactly what Gino did. And he kept it super simple, which is one of our 5 leadership abilities that we emphasize all the time, simplicity. So we take that 10-year target and we back it down into a 3-year plan. And we're simply predicting where we want to be in 3 short years. We use simple predictions. What revenue do we need to have? What profit do we need to be at? And what types of measurables can communicate that performance differently than revenue and profit to someone that may not resonate with? And then we simply ask the leadership team, given where we are now and where we're going in that 10-year target, what do we need to have in place, or what do we need to look like in 3 short years? And so we simply get input from all of the leadership team members on the 5 to 15 bullet points that paint the picture. These are more high-level bullet points. We're not asking them to clearly articulate exactly SMART goals at that 3-year picture. It's roughly we're going to have 20% more right people, right seats, because we're going to grow and we need to expand. We may have a new satellite office. We may need to have a marketing strategy developed and employed. And it's just through discussion that we get those 5 to 15 bullet points that paint that picture.
And I think the important part of that is because I had written down how I was going to ask the question, how smart are these goals? And SMART is like an acronym for building smart. You probably know the acronym. I won't be able to rip it off here. But the point is, don't get consumed with the details on the 10-year and the 3-year. And then, so from the 3-year, we'll go to 1 year and talk about what does the 1 year look like, and even how smart are those goals as well.
Yeah. So what we've done when we've started to do that 3-year picture is set us up for success in 2 different ways. Number one, it helps making the achievement of that 3-year picture, when we're as a leadership team aligned, that much more closer to succeeding at hitting that, because we're all on the same page and we're going to be rowing in the same direction to get there. But then it also sets us up for really great 1-year planning. We can easily, as human beings, take a higher level picture in a 3-year and back it down into a 1-year. What are the most immediate needs and priorities from that 3-year picture that we need to begin executing on? And so from that 3-year, we use the same predictions. What revenue can we predict in this next year? What profitability? What measurables? And then what are the top 3 to 7 goals? Which these goals are SMART. So by the end of the year, we want to understand what done looks like and what success is for us that are helping us towards that 3-year picture. So I teach my teams, if we can hit our 1-year goals 3 years in a row, we're going to hit that 3-year picture, do that 3-year roughly 3 times in a row, we're going to hit that 10-year target. And it's simply by taking the next step and breaking those 1-year goals down into quarterly milestones or rocks that keep us laser focused on that quarter and doing the most important stuff that quarter that we need to do that will enable the success of that 1 year, getting us towards a 3-year, eventually hitting that 10-year target.
And to me, 90-day rocks, quarterly rocks is where the magic really happens in a business. And one thing I would say here is that when you set your annual goals, you don't know what, if you set those in December or January, it's hard to predict what September looks like. So like we had an acquisitions target for the year, and so in Q1, it's okay. What are the relationships we need to build? What are the connections we need to make? We're focused on the measurable things that we can do in Q1 to expand upon our relationships and give us the best opportunity to hit our acquisitions goal for the year. But fast forward Q3, okay, we're on track for that. So we need to shift what our quarterly goal is within the context of the annual or the long-term goal, because it's not the same in Q4 as it was in Q1. Things will shift over 90 days. So if you can talk through that more, but before we do too, can you explain the rock analogy and what that means? Because I think this, by the way, is so important for business, and personally, it's something to think about too. So kind of explain the rock, where the term rocks come from.
Sure. Rocks is a Stephen Covey analogy. If you have a glass jar, that glass jar represents all the time that you have in a day. Rocks, pebbles, sand, and water are all the things that you have to accomplish. Rocks represent those biggest priorities, those most important things that we have to get done. Those are the things that are going to help us succeed at that annual planning. And if we put the pebbles, sand, and water, the day-to-day tasks that I have to do, the interruptions, all those other things in first, those rocks won't fit and we don't have time. So it's really a time management tool to stay focused on the most important things, not get bogged down by all the other things, so that we can try to hit 80% of that rock completion each quarter after quarter.
Yeah. And then talk through, so we establish annual goals and then quarterly rocks. 3 to 7 items, I think you said quarterly that everyone will have business items. How do we then measure that? How do we make sure on a weekly basis, are we on track? Are we doing the big rocks first? Or are we getting caught up in the mundane, the whirlwind, the pebbles and sand items?
Yeah, and that's through a meeting pulse, staying consistently focused on the most important things. So human nature, we tend to procrastinate. I think it's called the Parkinson principle. The amount of time that you're given to do something is the amount of time it will take you to do it. Meaning if I have 90 days to do it, I'm probably going to procrastinate up until that last 15-day push, 5-day push. Sometimes it's 1-day push before clients come into a session with me that they're getting the rocks done. Yes. So Gino's built in weekly accountability where we're checking in, and we have to say in front of our peers whether or not we're on track or off track to get that completed. There is some peer accountability that helps us have a little competitiveness within that leadership team. I don't want to show up with my peers and say that I'm off track or that I'm going to hold us back. And so typically everyone rises up a level and wants to be really considerate of making sure that they're on track. And when they're not, we're able to have different kinds of conversations about why, what's holding them back, how can we help solve those things. Yeah.
And this is where, building that there's a system of accountability. There's all kinds of tools. We'll ask Laura where you can be directed for her website, for EOS, Traction, the book, there's all kinds of resources around this that you can see the specific tools and apply them to your business. So I want to talk culture a little bit and the accountability chart and how we do that. But before we do, one thing I'll say that we do. So Laura, I don't know if this is against the rules or not, but I'm just going to say it anyway. In our organization, we have a level 10 meeting every single Monday where we kick it off and we go through. So we follow the agenda very specifically, but when we have our rocks, our team has 3 personal rocks that we talk about too in that meeting. Just, hey, are we holding ourselves accountable to what we're working on? If it's from a family, health, faith, whatever it might be, and talk about building the culture of the organization as well and holding people accountable. So I think that's a little thing that we've done that I think has been really powerful to get to know each other better. And hey, don't share anything that you're not comfortable sharing with the team, of course. But if you have a reading goal this quarter that you want to focus on, let's talk about that. And are you on track or not? So that's been powerful. That a little thing that we've added to it. I'm not asking you to vouch for that. You can comment on that as we maybe transition into building culture and how we really build culture and use EOS as a tool to do so.
Well, I'll touch on it and say if that works for you and that helps solidify the team and understand one another and learn more about one another better, then go for it. I think most teams are to the place where they feel too busy to be able to incorporate things like that and to take the time. And so I say congrats to you for doing that. The way that we build culture with EOS is by establishing some behavioral accountabilities. Oftentimes we may work with a person and their performance may be really great, but there's just something off about them, just not quite a fit, and we can't put our hands on it. And so within EOS, we establish core values, the guiding characteristics of the behaviors that we expect. And those are equally as important to the performance accountabilities. But oftentimes core values are pretty trite, and they're either featured on a website or on some placard in a lobby, and they're not really utilized to reinforce the behaviors. They're not really used to reward or recognize somebody around good exhibition of those core values. And they're often not used to course correct somebody when they may have blinders on. And so helping to clear the blinders and establish the expectations of behavior is as critical to the performance. And that's what we deem to be culture. And so EOS builds those core values into multiple areas. We can do core value shout outs periodically in weekly level 10. Some teams create special core value acknowledgement programs and recognition where they're giving peer-to-peer feedback. We build these into quarterly conversations where we're having informal discussions with our employees about their behaviors and how aligned or misaligned they are so that we can give them the opportunity to change behaviors if needed.
Yeah. So a couple things. First of all, I think that, there's a process to everything. So building those core values as an organization, making the final decision. Again, you can do this, in my opinion. If you're in a big company that has core values, but you never hear about them, they're never talked about, think about talking to your team, building your core values within your small team. And trust me, this is really impactful. I would say the most impactful thing we've done in the last 12 months is build our core values, talk about them regularly, but also hiring around them, because we're posting them on our job descriptions and saying, if you don't fit these core values, let's not waste each other's time, because we are going to live by these core values. They are important to us. And I think because of that, we're probably filtering down some of the resumes we maybe get. The discussions in the interviews have been different than I think they would be otherwise. There was someone that was saying, don't just interview the paper, the resume, the experience. Yes, that can be important. There's truth. It's important, but the core values and core value alignment to me is so important. And I think the term that I like so much is right people, right seat. Core values is getting the right people in the organization that align with the core values. And then we also have to put them in the right seat. Tell me more about that.
The right seat is what they're best at and love to do. And so I say that the accountability chart work that we do is like an organizational chart on steroids. An org chart just simply tells us a name and a title. It doesn't give us any clarity of expectations of whomever it is that sits in that seat. And it doesn't give me any understanding as an employee of what I can expect from that seat. And so an accountability chart takes us through an exercise where we just look at the structure first needs of the business. And I would say that the accountability chart is most often the most underused tool or taken for granted tool, because we assume we know what I do, we know what you do, and we make assumptions around that. And once we start getting clarity on the structure and getting clarity on the 5 bullet points, the really major priorities of focus for that seat, it can help us create the right structure in a simple way for the organization, rather than doing someone a disservice and saying, I'm going to hire Sally from church because she's a really nice person and I'll find a place for her.
Right.
I have been in that position where I was hired because I had a great resume. I interviewed well and a position was created for me. And despite my lack of trying to plan a 30, 60, 90-day plan, the organization didn't really know what to do with me and didn't have any vision. And so that didn't feel super great. And I've also been in the organization where I mentioned misalignment with core values. So I think it's our jobs as leaders and hiring managers to make sure that we're setting our team members up the best way that we can for success, and utilizing core values to hire, fire, reward, recognize, like attract the right people, repel those folks that don't fit, is a great way for core value alignment. And then to be really crystal clear on what we expect from the seat before somebody's even considered, before a person, an individual is considered for that, also gives us more clarity.
Yeah. Can you, so core values, the tool, the core values analyzer, I think is so important. So you meet with organizations, you work directly with companies, you talk through, you facilitate a discussion around core values if people are in alignment with that or not. So there's a tool you use and then there's a discussion you have. I'm imagining you've been in some really, I'll say tough, direct, I don't know what the right words are for those discussions, but I can imagine. So tell me about the tool and maybe some examples of what might happen in these discussions without getting too specific.
Well, I'll say that the beauty in the way that Gino has laid this out is that we take people through exercises and they're not really sure what's coming. We use 3 different filtering mechanisms to get to the heart of the core values for their specific organization. We're beginning with tangible personas, I would say, within the organization, using those to filter down, using some values traps that we want to make sure we stay away from when we're establishing these core values. And then we go through and use the leadership team as our third filter. So we've really vetted it in various ways by the time we get to the end of what those core values are. And from there, they can take the concept, the nuance behind them, and write them in their own language for the tone of the organization. And we don't introduce the tool that we use to evaluate those core values until the very end of that exercise, when we do plug in the leaders' names that are in the room, and we have everyone kind of give feedback using a plus, plus, minus, and a minus rating system, how they consistently or inconsistently exhibit these core values. So we use that leadership team as a gauge to whether or not these are the right core values for us as well, and understanding if they're a fit for us.
Yeah. And I think the core values, the people analyzer, as you call that tool, is very impactful. And there's a process before we get to that. And I think that's Laura's main point. But I'll say this, and I'll kind of tie this, because I've heard someone else say this about this, basically this core values, the people analyzer, the core values tool is, so the way you do it is you have every person and you have your core values. So like if it's ours is character is a core value. Every person says, okay, about the other people, they're a plus, they're a minus, or they're a plus minus. And you go around and you do that and you rate and you give feedback. But what I would say about, like, one thing we talk about on this podcast a lot is the power of your network and your associations. And this is at work and it's also personally. And think about if you have core values for your business, but also personally, and are people really misaligned with your core values? And you can't get rid of your mom. You can't get rid of your sister. You can't do it. But if you have friends that you're just not aligned with them, or people that you're around a lot with, that they would, oh my gosh, here are my 5 core values, and they would be minus on 3 of these. So these tools and these concepts can apply personally. This is a business discussion more than personal, but this is real stuff. And I think maybe to bring it back to business, that's why these are so impactful. Like, you are building the culture of a team, small team, big team. You are building the culture of an organization, and it is so, so important. You're impacting lives. You're impacting people that are then going home to their families and impacting their lives. So leadership and having the right systems to support you in leadership, I think, is so important. So right people, core values, right seats. And one thing I'll say about this is, you talked about it, but like the accountability chart and most underutilized thing is, I think there is so much probably unknown frustration, if I'm more direct about it, is around, that's not my job, or that is my job. Why is this person doing it? And whether it's a big organization or small, getting clarity of roles and responsibilities and accountability, I think, is so, so important.
Yes, it helps uncover some missed areas, things that could fall through the gaps if we don't have them covered. Oftentimes, as human beings, we want to be so nice, and especially in small, growing organizations, everyone wants to help out. I'll do that. And if we don't get clarity on the structure and the right seat that should be accountable for that, it becomes very gray and wish-washy. And everyone just kind of pitches in, and nobody's got real accountability over things. That's my experience in really small organizations. Larger organizations, my experience is that we make assumptions that we know how this facility operates and how the team operates together. And I've witnessed some teams go through the exercise of creating that structure and walking out and operating exactly as they did before we went through that exercise. Unbeknownst to them, those habits are really hard to break. EOS is change management at its finest. So I say it's the accountability chart is the most underutilized tool, but I would say that that's in the beginning. It's often overlooked as a powerful tool. And until I continue to hold the mirror up and call out the gaps, call out the gray areas for them, help them understand the nuances of how to use this successfully to expand or contract their organization, it's discarded as something we just innately know how to do because I have a title and I have a job.
Yeah. And I think the other thing, you said change management. The other word that came to mind is like conflict resolution, because I think we avoid conflict so much. And again, EOS it's a system that highlights the conflict through your weekly meetings and whether things align to your longer term goals. And one thing we didn't talk about earlier, I kind of want to ask about is, when I was in the corporate world, I learned about management by exception, which means, hey, okay, we can have a scorecard. We can talk about the good things, but what are the problems we have to solve? And there's a unique way that EOS does that in the weekly meeting. Talk a little bit about the issues list process.
So the issues list is can also be considered opportunities. Sometimes that negative connotation of the word issues trips people up, but it's essentially a brain dump for us where we have to put something to solve with the leadership team or a member or members of the leadership team. And so it's a place for us to go to get some resolution, to share information, to get opinions or feedback on something. And you were talking conflict resolution. That's really where we're solving the issues in the business, right? We're in business to solve issues. So we shouldn't be issue adverse. We should be diving in and looking at those as opportunities. The scorecard is another tool that's used in the weekly level 10 also, and that's another tool to solve issues. When we're not hitting our weekly measurable or our weekly goal, I'm just coaching my teams, ask the question, what is the story that this number is telling us? And what is it that we need to address or fix or change? We are entrepreneurial minded and we can pivot, we can make change, we can make impact. And so that's constantly the mindset that I'm trying to reinforce when we're in these meetings and discussions. And ideally, we're hearing from most of the people if it's addressing, the issue is addressing most of them, or we're hearing from people across the other side, meaning I don't sit in the finance seat and this is a finance issue, but I can ask really great questions. I can spark some good conversation. I believe wholeheartedly that, owners that bring EOS into their organization or any type of strategic execution tool like EOS is so that they can take the burden off their shoulders and spread it across that leadership team so that everybody has some equal weight in how they're solving issues and helping this business move forward. And that's the objective of that issue solving, to solve those most important things on a daily and weekly basis, get them out of our way so that we can stay focused on our rocks and get the most important things done.
Yeah. And again, you can hear like the holistic nature of this. This covers a lot. And I think it can sound like a lot, maybe it can feel overwhelming. It is really a simple system. And, if you come from a world where you're in a ton of meetings, you're maybe even if that's what you're thinking about right now, this sounds like a lot and a lot of meetings and a lot of planning. No, what this has done for our business is we have a weekly level 10 meeting. It's scheduled for 90 minutes. Usually it's right at 60, maybe even less minutes, under an hour. And it's pretty efficient. We get to the point. We cover a lot of ground. We know what's going on for the week. And then we have very few meetings outside of that. And I know different organizations are different, but again, in my opinion, these principles can be applied whether you're running a small team in a big company of 5 people, or if you're running a business, especially, you should really be thinking like, if you feel like things are just chaotic or your time is, you're always trying to capture more time or you wish you had more time to get things done. This can organize all of this, put it all together, and it really help you do your role as the visionary and help your team do their roles as the operations leader or the finance leader or sales and marketing leader, whatever it might be. So I would just encourage you to really look into this more. And Laura, if someone's really intrigued, but they're like, I just don't know how to start or where to start, what is a good way for them to look into this more to figure out, does this work for my team or my business?
Sure. So the best way is to read the book Traction. It's like the playbook of EOS, and it's going to give you a really great foundation to how EOS is deployed with the tools in an organization. The Fable version of that book is Get a Grip, where you can really kind of understand the dynamics between an implementer like myself and a leadership team structure and some of the struggles and nuances that they go through in implementation. You can download free tools from EOS Worldwide also. The Vision Traction Organizer, a 2-page document to house 8 simple answers to 8 questions by the leadership team, is a really great tool to get started with. If you're unclear about where you're going, you can use that as a tool to facilitate that discussion amongst your leadership team and what they hope for that vision so that we can get on the same page. Gino's done a really phenomenal job of being abundant mindset, of having an abundance mindset and sharing these tools. And I will help and coach self-implementing companies as well, just to remove any obstacles from them, get them back on the right path so that they're getting the best value of the tools and implementation also.
Yeah. And if you have an organization or a company that you're running and you're thinking, well, this might help, definitely, Laura came in, really helped us, kind of course corrected us and what we were doing in our business. Regarding the books, I think if you're a reader and you're a student and you study a lot and you're really, really interested in this, I think go to Traction, check out that book. It's going to be the playbook to how to do this. If you don't read as much, or you're not, you're worried that it'll, textbook type feel, Get a Grip is entertaining. It's very interesting. There's a story behind it. It's a fable, but it captures the essence of what EOS and Traction is about. So I would encourage you to check out those resources and the others that Laura referenced. Laura, you're working with a lot of different organizations, a lot of different small companies. You're seeing the impact I'm sure you have on the business owners, the business leaders, the managers, the leadership team within those companies. I'm sure you're seeing high stress environments, and you kind of slowly see A, stress melt away, and B, their traction towards their vision. That's got to be pretty neat to be a part of. How does what you do, how does it make you feel?
Well, I'm humbled to be in the room with these leaders. I'm humbled when they are willing to take some coaching from me, given my 7 years of experience, and apply it and do the work. I love to see owners and leaders that are less frustrated, that are able to authentically show up as themselves to work and not feel like they have to be somebody else or watch what they say. They can equally participate in conversations and share their opinions and perspectives. I've had several conversations with leaders that are super hard to get on the phone in the very early days because they take 75 to 100 calls themselves on a daily basis. And I watch that dissipate and be transferred to other members of the leadership team or down into the organization, or resolved through process and systems that we put in place. And I watch the owners typically become a little bit less stressed, more confident in who they are, and more engaged in the business too, because of what's going on within the leadership team dynamics and the changes that they're making. I have one company that has said, it's probably about 9 months to a year into their journey, EOS has become a way of life for us. It's just what we do, and now it's a common thread throughout the whole organization, and it's a common thread that knits them together, the same language, but understanding also that we have a common purpose that we're all driving towards. And so that's really cool to see when things are rolled out, the impact to others. Oftentimes we over anticipate what employees are going to feel or how they're going to respond to a rollout of EOS. And what my observation and experience shows is that human beings want a system to plug into to feel accountable and successful. And that's what EOS can do for them.
Yeah. And I think I'd add to that. They want purpose and vision behind what they're doing. And what I love you said there too earlier is that you see owners, leaders confident in who they are. I also think that you're giving them the tools and the resources to allow them the time and the capacity to be who they are, because we have a lot of visionaries that are maybe having to do everything in the business because they don't have the systems or the processes. So EOS can be that tool for you. Laura, this has been amazing. You've had so much impact to a lot of different companies. You've been really helpful to our listeners. How can specifically, you talked about Traction, Get a Grip, the books. How can people find out specifically more about you and what you're doing?
You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can find me at eosworldwide.com/Laura-Rerucha.
Laura, you're awesome. I appreciate it so much. Definitely check out Laura. We appreciate the listeners so much. If you know of a business owner, a leader, someone that can put these tools in place, definitely share this episode with them. Share Laura's contact information. Just buy a couple of copies of Traction or Get a Grip and hand them out. We had a business leader luncheon a couple of months ago, and business owners were blown away by, wow, I have to figure out how to put this in place. They've been following up with Laura, and it can be really, really impactful. If you put the time in upfront and early to change your business, you can really change your business, your team, the culture of it. And there's a ripple effect of that. And Laura, you're having that ripple effect on so many people. I appreciate it so much. For the Purpose Matrix, signing off.